Hey folks, today we're going to talk about servicing drives, whether that be a floppy disk drive or an optical drive, because the principles are the same between them. Now, why would I want to service a drive, you might ask? Perhaps you're having issues with reading and writing to disks. Perhaps your drive isn't recognizing the disk at all, disks that you know to be good from having used them in other machines. Now, there can be other causes for this, such as drive controller failure or ribbon cable failures, but more often than not, I find giving the drive a basic service is enough to get it working properly again. So looking at our ribbon cable here, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, how can a cable fail? There's really nothing to them. We take a close look in at the connector, we can see that the ribbon is actually not part of the connector, it passes through it. So taking an even closer look at a new connector here, we can see that each pin has a set of fine serrations on the top, and that by passing the cable through the connector and then applying pressure on the top, it effectively impales the cable on that connector. Now, because they're not sealed from atmosphere, we can get a slight bit of corrosion there over a period of time. And so therefore that pin won't have quite a good a connection as what it did when it was made, and therefore we start seeing symptoms. So if all else fails, it always helps to try swapping out the ribbon cable if you're having issues with a drive. Okay, I'm not going to go through the disassembly of each of these drives because not all drives require disassembly, and with those that do, the process is not always the same between manufacturers. What I will say though is to take your time and be careful. Don't force any components. If you're finding something is not wanting to come free, just double check that you haven't missed any tabs, such as the tab we can see here that helps to retain the faceplate, or any screws. Here we can see that this top cover had one small screw that needed to be removed, and sometimes these hide underneath labels, so be sure to double check. Okay, with access to the drive now, the first thing I like to do is to give it a blowout with compressed air, whether that be with a shop compressor or with a can of compressed air, just to remove any larger debris such as dust. I then like to give any moving components, such as we can see our the drive, the spindle here, and also the drive rail, the gear set here for the drive's tray at the front, being careful though not to get any lubricant on the motor that drives the gear set, because it's driven by a rubber band which obviously relies on friction. On that note, if you do find you're having issues with the tray inserting or ejecting, it's always worth just replacing that rubber band. With our 5 1/4 inch drive here, we can see the mechanism for the drive spindle and also the head is their moving parts. And with our 3 1/2 inch drive here, again you can see the drive spindle there, and also there's a drive rail just there. When accessing the heads for cleaning, there is a little bit of leeway there. You can see that's the drive head there, the little white box in the middle. There's also one, if we look carefully, on the upper there as well. Same with the 5 1/4 inch drive. We'll just lift that up there carefully. We can see the little white box in the middle there, and one on the top. And with the optical drive, there's just the lens facing upwards there. So to give you a demonstration here, we only need the slightest amount of PTFE. That's all we need, just a little bit. As you can see, I'm barely putting any on. We really don't need much. And really don't need much at all. And in fact, if you're just servicing the one drive, I wouldn't go to the expense of purchasing a can. It's not necessary, but I do find it makes the drives operate just a little bit quieter and smoother than they otherwise would. Having done that, I then move on to cleaning the heads themselves. So for this, I use a cotton tip with some isopropyl alcohol. Now, I use a 70%. Some will advocate for a higher purity, such as 99%. In my neck of the woods, at least, the higher the purity, the higher the cost. So I find 70% to be a good compromise, and I've never had any issues with using it. So, as I said, I use a cotton bud that I soak in the IPA, and then using a twisting motion, I'd go across the head, which, as I said, there is that little white box, and the upper one as well. Same with the 5¼ inch drive, the lower and upper we can just see there, and with the optical drive just across the lens, and then you're done.